Hey everybody, I'm Sean Kitchen, and this is the Northwest Corner Podcast. This episode of the Northwest Corner Podcast is brought to you in part by Walmart. Save money, live better. And by Men's Warehouse. You're going to like the way you look. I guarantee it. And special shout out to our main sponsor, Upstate Exposures Magazine. We share the stories of the people, places, events, history, businesses, and music of upstate South Carolina. Always free to read. Go to upstateexposures.com. We have a special guest in the studio today, Officer Hops.
How are you?
Oh, I'm swell. But before we go anywhere, obviously, we need to explain the Officer Hops thing. That's not really your name.
No.
But it's a well-established nickname.
Right.
Okay, so tell us the story behind the nickname.
The character from Zootopia, Officer Hops, is a small bunny, and the whole premise of the movie is that when she decides she wants to be a police officer, the rest of the animals are very discouraging to her. Like, she's, animals of prey are not police officers. Little bunnies aren't intimidating, things like that. And then she goes on to be quite energetic and engaging, and she makes friends with people that nobody wants to make friends with, and solves a huge crime for the city that she works for. I guess that relates to me in people's opinions because I'm of, we'll call it, diminutive stature. I'm 5'1.5", and I think it's important that we put the half in there. And, advanced age, like in my 40s, and not what people classically think of as law enforcement. But I don't act like what people perceive as law enforcement either. So
I like that 5'1.5". That's like when I was 8.5 years old. It was very important to put the half
right.
in
Yes,
there.
I am 2 months away from being 9 or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so we've established you do work in law enforcement.
Yes, I do.
And it's safe to say that you're not, say, the receptionist at a police precinct. You are, in fact, a law enforcement officer.
Right.
Correct?
I'm on patrol.
Okay. So how long have you worked in law enforcement?
I've been on patrol for over 3 years, and I started my career in the jail also for 3 years.
So Officer Hops, the 5'1.5".
Yes, thank you.
Non-butt kicking, bunny of an officer.
Yes.
Started her career in law enforcement in a jail.
Yes. Yep. Not to be confused with a prison. Most people don't know the difference.
All right. What's the difference?
A jail is local. It will be in a county, in a county's jurisdiction. So sheriff's departments are responsible for detention. So a sheriff's department hosts the jail. The jail is where you get taken immediately for arrests and where you would serve a sentence for misdemeanor crimes or short-term sentences. Felonies, larger crimes, those people that have to stay in the system for a long time go to prison. That is like a felony sentence or long years where they go into a prison system. Those tend to be more residential instead of holding. So the jail, because it's designed for, theoretically 3 months or less, is kind of a holding facility, whereas prisons, that's where you hear about people getting employment, learning a trade, those kinds of things.
Okay. So we're not talking, like a supermax setting with, guys in there with multiple consecutive life sentences or things like that.
Right. But the jails have the pleasure of dealing with drunks as you bring them in off the street, or people that are under the influence of drugs, immediate answers as they're being brought off the road. So sometimes they're a little bit more active in intake.
Okay, so I'll admit, my conceptions of things, so many of them are rooted in television shows
right.
that I grew up watching. So when you said, the drunks being brought in, the first thing I think of is the Andy Griffith show, with Otis, the town drunk, coming and letting himself into the jail cell every night and sticking his arm through the bars and hanging the key back up behind him.
Right.
So we're not talking something like that.
No. But keep in mind that the first thing to go when you're under the influence of alcohol is judgment. So most of the people that are coming in that have had too much to drink have made just really flawed errors in judgment, whether it be to drive, obviously, that's the one that most people think of, but they also enter into decisions around domestic violence or stalking type behavior, following somebody they shouldn't follow or harassing folks that they shouldn't harass or things like that. Or they're just so intoxicated you can actually, if they have no one to come get them, even if they're just on the street or hanging out at a gas station, but they're so intoxicated that they could be a risk to themselves, you can take them to the jail for a hold. If no one can get them, that's like the last resort. You call their mama and their brother and, whatnot and try to get them off the street. Because if you know that they're really impaired and leave them there and they stagger into traffic, that could be perceived as your mistake.
Oh, okay, because you saw a problem and you
left them there.
You, the person in law enforcement, didn't do anything
Right.
about it and something happened to them, you could be held liable.
Yes.
I gotcha. So at the level of facility that you were working in at that time, did you see a lot of repeat offenders? Was repeat business a big issue for you?
Well, not only repeat business, but poverty kept folks there. So if they had committed a crime that set their bond somewhat high and then they didn't have the money to bail themselves out of jail or any kind of way to convince a bail bondsman that they'd be able to pay for that loan of money or whatnot, then they ended up staying for months. I mean, as many people have figured out, the court system is a slow, like molasses slow system. So they would stay, and you would see the same people, every day, and you do rounds in the jail every 30 minutes to check on all of the inmates. The facility that I was in, by comparison, was small, so it was just a couple hundred at max capacity.
That's small?
Yeah, sure.
A couple hundred is small.
Right.
A couple hundred was the graduating class of my high school.
Right. Well, I mean, there's neighboring counties that have 7 floors of detention space.
No kidding.
Yeah, so...
Oh, wow. And this is still at the jail level, not the prison level?
Right.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Well, you have to keep people separated, too, so they have different units for different levels of criminals and different genders and different ages and all kinds of stuff, so...
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it was really, I got to know the inmates at the jail, sometimes because they came back frequently, because they just were in a cycle, sometimes because they ended up staying because they couldn't afford to get themselves out.
Oh, okay. So was this career in law enforcement, was this something that you have wanted to do for many, many years, or did time and circumstance kind of bring you into this line of work? How did you get into law enforcement?
No, I did not grow up saying, you know what I want to be? No. I mean, well, because it hadn't really been introduced because of my small stature and,
I remember career day in junior high school. I remember the police officer they brought into my school, at least, was about 7'9".
Right,
he was enormous.
Yeah, no.
You are not enormous.
No. At the time that it all came to be, I was actually working for a newspaper that... I don't want to name the newspaper to insult them, but they're connected kind of nationwide.
Okay.
For different broadcasting and newspapers and whatnot.
They have some larger affiliations.
Yeah, there you go. That's good terminology. So I was working there and really actually feeling like I wasn't being true to my moral standards, my moral compass, because I didn't feel like they were being fair. my mother always told me that even from young childhood, I had this strong sense of fairness and right and wrong. I always saw the world kind of black and white in those issues. And so I was aware of the stories that were being brought into the newspaper, and also aware that many of them were tossed out by bias, I guess is the...
Editorial bias? You mean?
Yeah.
Okay.
That the person that was in charge there would determine that
they had a particular agenda. They wanted certain kinds of stories.
Exactly. And that just didn't seem right to me. It bothered me a lot because even though I wasn't necessarily an advocate for the stories that were getting bypassed, you can't call yourself a community newspaper and not share the news of your community.
So this observation of this bias, is that what prompted you? You know what, I'm going to go into law enforcement and do something about this? Or
no. So I was working there and I was very frustrated and just feeling challenged by not living true to my morals. And I sat in my front yard one day, overly emotionally taxed by the whole thing, and kind of looked out on the horizon and prayed about wanting to know what I should be doing from here, because it wasn't bad money and things like that. So, so it specifically, as I was talking, it's like, God, I kind of need a sign. I'm not great with signs though, so it has to be like an obvious sign, like a hit you over the head, maybe like a billboard.
I'm the same way.
Yeah, that kind of thing. Don't be passive here and try to send me any kind of secret squirrel messages, because I need a sign.
You say secret squirrel messages too?
Yeah.
I thought I was the only one who said that.
Yeah.
I'll talk about my secret decoder ring. I
Yep. So, and that was that. I went to bed. The next day I went back to work at the newspaper. Part of my job was to collect the arrest reports from the local sheriff's office. And when I went over to do that, the sheriff offered me a job. He had...
you had an established working relationship?
I was just familiar.
You didn't just walk in off the street and he said, I want you, come work for me.
Well, I went over to do what I've been doing for however many years, to collect the arrest reports, except he said that he wanted me to come work. He was opening a new facility. They needed women to work with the women, and he liked my style. And, so we were familiar with each other through the community.
Okay.
So I thought that was a sign. You say, God, what should I do? And the next day the sheriff says, come work for me.
Job.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I called my mother and said, guess what? I'm going to go work at the jail. And she hung up on me. So I guess she wasn't immediately embracing the idea.
So you're saying it went over like a pregnant pole vault.
Right, a lead balloon.
Okay.
There's a lot of, it didn't go over great. But she was religious, so I called her back and tried to tell her that I'd asked God about a different job, and that I was feeling a little bit of trepidation about going back out in my front yard and saying, God, my mother doesn't approve. Could you send me something else that my mom might not be so resistant to, please? So she, it took a while.
Did she eventually warm up to the idea?
Yeah, she came around. I have enough trying experiences in my history that she was eventually the person that told me that it was those experiences that made me strongly empathetic and that would actually make me a good person in the system.
Do you think that is where your sense of justice came from the things that you've experienced in your life?
Yes, absolutely. I think most of us in the world have had really trying experiences. In my mind, they are the experiences that kind of bring you proverbially to your knees, where you're stopped in your tracks and brought to your knees with trauma. The difference will be who gets up. And there have been times when I've thought, like, well, that's it. I'm going to stay here in the fetal position. I'm calling it quits. I don't want to go on. This is too hard. Life sucks. I'm going to stay here and waller in it. And then I'll make excuses about why I'm wallowing in it. Maybe I'll hope for the people that have moved down the path to come back for me and drag me with them or whatever, but I'm no longer putting in effort. And a couple days later, I get over that and get back up and dust myself up and come with a different solution.
Not everybody does get back up, though.
Right.
So what do you think? You obviously have chosen a different path. You've decided to keep getting back up. Mm-hmm. And it sounds like you made a pretty significant course correction in your life.
Right.
And pursued a wildly different path than the one you were on. Mm-hmm. Where did that come from? Not everybody gets back up when they're knocked down. What motivates you to keep getting back up again? Not everybody's like that.
I'm a visual person. I always create these little stories in my mind. And here recently, I think it was a GoDaddy commercial. I hope I'm allowed to say that on the radio.
If not, we'll edit it out.
There you go. It was a GoDaddy commercial where the woman had found great success. Nobody had believed in her for her company or whatever, and she found success. I don't even remember what she had done.
Okay.
But she went back to the people in her life. You may remember it, maybe not. I thought it was hysterical. Where she'd go back, she tapped on the door at the kindergarten, and then the teacher opened the door and she'd get real close. She's like, "Oh, Miss Sally, do you remember me?" "Yes, I do." She'd say, "Stick it." And then she went through different people in her life, and she ends up at her granny's bedside in the nursing home. She's like, "Granny, Granny," shaking her shoulder. And then when Granny opens an eye, she says, "Stick it." And so that's me. That's what compels me. I'm like, no way.
You just want to go around telling people to stick it.
Yeah, I don't want.
Gotcha.
I don't want to live up to their expectations of my failure, especially. To be more specific, since I was a victim of domestic violence, I did not want to give that person the right to have control over me.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
And so instead of making him right that I was all of those things, that domestic violence, it's actually a cycle. It's something that all abusers really do. They bring their victim down as a control effort. And I thought, no way. If I quit here, if I stop, if I stay in the fetal position, if I let him win, he's won. I'm no loser, So
you really are Officer Hops then,
right?
Aren't you?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm like, no way. There's no way you're going to tell me that I can't, I won't, I whatever it is, based on my size, based on my gender, based on anything. So yeah, it is. It's the stick it mentality.
Is that something that you developed because of the circumstances in your life, or have you always had that kind of that inner flame? Was that something that was instilled in you by your parents or anything like that?
I didn't have quitters for parents.
Good models.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so it probably was. I didn't really identify it until I'd been victimized a couple of good times and come back swinging.
Okay. So we've established that your life took kind of a hard right turn, figuratively speaking.
Right.
And you went from a very different life path and career path into law enforcement.
Right.
And this is such a good point in history for someone to pursue a career in law enforcement, isn't it? I mean, every time you turn on the TV or the radio,
something positive to say.
There's all these positive stories about people in law enforcement, and everybody loves the police.
Oh, yeah.
Don't they?
Yes,
yeah. This is a great time to be in law enforcement.
Yeah, no, it is very hard to recruit people.
Sarcasm.
Yeah, how do you recruit someone? I mean, we have openings now. How do you recruit somebody and say, here's the best part. You get to put on a uniform every day and people will hate you just for what you wear.
Yeah,
Isn't that great?
That's almost like saying, do you want to start an exciting new career as a telemarketer?
Yeah, exactly.
How do you feel about selling encyclopedias door to door?
Yeah.
So this is completely sarcastic.
Sure.
We're joking, of course. But this is a challenging time in our nation's history to even be in law enforcement, much less start a fledgling career in law enforcement.
Right.
Police get a bad rap. Let's just call it what it is.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously something is driving you and keeping you motivated to pursue this. Or else I would have to think that at some level you would have given this up about 3 weeks after you started.
Right.
So what is it that's motivating you? You said you started off in a jail. You said you're no longer working in that jail environment. You've moved on to what was the phrase? A patrol
I'm a patrol
officer?
officer.
Okay. So now you've moved into the next phase in your career in law enforcement as a patrol officer. So obviously you're motivated to keep pushing forward with this.
Right.
What is it that's driving you? There's clearly something that you found in this career that's ticking some boxes, that's scratching you where you itch. So tell me a little bit about what's motivating you, what's pushing you to keep pursuing this.
Okay. To give credit where credit's due, I work in an agency that is very catering to each individual officers and plays to their strengths. So if you are especially good or interested in traffic accidents, they'll send you to a lot of education to become the best at investigating traffic accidents.
Okay.
If you are especially interested in drug arrests and stopping that cycle, they will send you to lots and lots of classes on, police law and making sure that you are following your constitutional rights and theirs in order to make these arrests, and how to find it, and what are signs and studies, and you name it.
Okay.
So for me, they never, I don't know how to put it, they have never discouraged me to be true to myself, to police and wear the badge the way that I choose to. You were not forced to make charges or catch X amount of speeders or things like that.
The quota system.
Yes,
that
exactly. That doesn't
with.
Exist, by the way. It just, that's all make believe. But so there's that, and the person that's in charge of my department has had a long-standing belief in the importance of community policing, in that we get out and interact with the community, get in the schools, get in the businesses, stop and take time, check on senior citizens, so that when you do show up in times of crisis, you're already a familiar face.
Okay.
And
in the generation I grew up in, they called that an old-fashioned beat cop.
Right.
Out walking the beat. Is that what you're describing?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, we do walk the beat. It's not a completely walkable town, but we do walk the areas that are walkable, and we get in the schools every day and eat lunch with little kids and drive through our neighborhoods and get out and talk to folks that are working in their yard and things like that, and just stay. We have a lot of community programs to give back to our community, to raise money for folks in need and reach out to them. So those are all things that I'm passionate about, and I'm in a department that helps grow that and flourish that kind of feeling. I'm also particularly interested in working with domestic violence and women and children victims.
Because of your personal history.
Right. Well, not only that, but we're short on that.
What do you mean?
There's not a lot of women in law enforcement. And then, they get moved into their own specialty areas, which is great. But when you're a woman victim of a sex crime by a man, you don't necessarily want to go into a little closed room with another man and tell him all of the dark
gory
details. Yeah.
Okay.
And talk about all of that violation and stuff. It's much easier to do with a woman. I have children, so kids kind of gravitate towards me. I think they sense the maternal instinct, so I can build a natural rapport with kids who will crawl up on my lap and twirl my hair and then tell me all about how they accidentally set fire to the front porch of their house. Crime solved. Over Barbies and tea parties, that kind of thing. Obviously, we have parents there for everybody that's worried that I'm interrogating children. But yeah, no, it's just that was actually a case where a little kid set fire to the front porch. And, it was originally an arson investigation. It turned out that it was the little kid there that did it on accident,
Oh,
so
wow.
that was not necessarily a crime investigation, but we
Right.
got the answer. So, being
And it
allowed,
sounds like you were able to get through to the answer more quickly than maybe someone else would have, who would have approached it from much more of a Joe Friday, just the facts kind of approach.
yeah, sure. Well, and just stature. The uniforms are designed for intimidation, and I mean that's really you pull up in these muscle cars with these dark decals and lights, and then you get out in your dark uniforms, because that's a great idea, by the way, to put you in dark clothing out in the sunshine. It's spectacular, but
Are you saying it's warm?
it's really, really toasty. So you're perspiring and grumbling under your breath things about how you hate life or whatnot. And then you get out and you have a million tools on your belt. And little kids are exposed to cops. That's actually another fun little thing. I would patrol through a neighborhood, and this one little boy would be out on his bicycle, and he'd jump off the bike and like frantically run in the house screaming. Every time that I would come through the neighborhood, it was the strangest thing. So finally, his parents came out, and they said that they had made a parenting mistake, in their opinion, that they let him watch Cops when he was younger. I mean, this is
the TV show?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
This is just a little kid. He, I don't even think he was in school yet. So, 5-ish, running for his life. And they said that, screaming and arms flailing.
So he's afraid every time he sees you, he's afraid you're going to tackle him.
Yes. Yeah. See, because you know what they show on Cops. They do not show police officers walking through the schools and going to traffic accidents and things like that. They show, if you have an interaction with the cops, they will chase you, and their dog will bite you, and you'll have to hide under a trailer, and that kind of thing. They'll drag you down. They'll
So he
knock
had
you to the
been
ground.
taught the message, even if accidentally,
Right.
that the police were the enemy, that they
Terrifying.
exist to hurt you
Yeah.
and to bring harm to you.
Yeah. So it took me
gotcha.
2 years. We turned that around. I bribed him with prizes.
Can you say that in law enforcement?
It was that we have bounty. We have fun stickers, badge stickers, and bracelets talk about be a buddy, not a bully, and glow in the dark stuff, necklaces and pencils and pens and lunch boxes. Anyways, every time I went, I would take more police department bounty and
Police swag.
yeah, I was going to say booty. Yeah, and bribe
It's
him
okay.
out.
It's a family podcast, but you can say booty. That's not a bad word.
Like pirate booty. And, so taking little prizes and stuff and talk. And then he and his sister made up this dance about bicycle safety for me. So we gathered some officers to go over and see this whole dance about bicycle safety and make a big deal out of that. And, just keep.
Was it pretty good?
Yeah, it was funny, and they did the whole thing with bicycle helmets on, which just actually was more entertaining, if you can imagine. I mean, bicycle helmets are not flattering anyways. I'm an advocate, but yeah. Yep.
So going back to what you were saying earlier about the events in your life that have kind of molded and shaped you into who you are today and how you approach your duties as a law enforcement officer, the word that I keep hearing in my mind, but that you haven't actually said yet, it sounds to me like what you're saying between the lines is that you want to help people be restored.
Yes.
That's perhaps what you view your role as. So am I reading what you're saying the correct way?
Right. Well, I think that plays into the make the victim whole. And there's not always a cut and dry victim. As an example, just the other day we had a call from the local liquor store that a young man had stolen alcohol. They gave a description, and it was unfortunately someone that I'd already interacted with once in the day. So I knew that he was a homeless fellow.
Okay.
And he was easy to find. People always go to where they're familiar, to what's comfortable for them. So since I knew where he liked to hang out, that's exactly where I went. And lo and behold,
There he was.
There he was, because people return to what's familiar.
No, people are creatures of habit.
Yep, absolutely. And so he knew I had my eye on him. I got out. He scurried around the building. I scurried around after him. I called my sergeant over the radio and let him know where we were going to be. And before you know it, I flushed him out into the awaiting arms of my sergeant and went digging through the bushes like some kind of crazy mole rat. That's what it felt like. I had like sticks in my hair and it was crazy. You're like, anyways, so you emerge with the bottle of alcohol stolen from the alcohol store, completely sealed. So most people would think the victim is the alcohol store, the liquor store, and they are the first victim. So we called them and asked what they wanted to do, and they said they wanted money. They wanted to be paid for their product. Of course, we did talk about the fact that...
You mean as opposed to just giving them the product back?
Well, he could keep it if they paid for it.
Oh, okay.
They don't necessarily want to take back stuff that's left the store because they don't know if it's been tampered with and whatnot.
Yeah,
you know,
all right, I see your point.
Yeah, so, and I could have, and I discussed this with them very openly, that with the alcohol store, that I could write him a citation, but seeing as how he's homeless, the likelihood that he would make it to court a significant distance away.
It's probably at or approaching zero.
Right.
Gotcha.
Right. And then when he doesn't appear, they'll issue an order for his arrest. And then the next time that somebody interacts with him, he'll go to jail and he'll never be able to get himself out because he is homeless. And it just starts this cycle. And so if their whole goal was to get their money back, it'd be smart to just have him pay for it now.
Okay.
Instead of push it through the court system, which would ultimately cost everybody a lot of money. And this kid would be buried in a cycle of failing to appears and all kinds of stuff. Which
This sounds like a vicious downward spiral.
Right. Once you get stuck in it, it's like getting flushed down the toilet. Gone. So they agreed that this was not me coaxing them. It was just kind of talking reality. They agreed. They asked for their money. So I said, okay, can you pay for this? And he said, yeah, I think so. It's whatever, $6. Let's pretend. And he dug through his pocket change and he had $4, which I am sure is why he stole it in the first place. So he had $4. So now we're really stuck. What are we going to do with this kid? So I propose that I give him the $2 to pay for it, to help him out. Now, is that unconventional? Absolutely. I don't do that with everybody. I don't bail people out of trouble. But going back to the jail thing, I actually knew this boy from the jail. And he had been in the foster care system his whole life and grew up in a lot of, prior to foster care, his home life was terrible at best. So he'd already had a tough row to hoe, and I just didn't want to participate in being yet another huge hurdle and another person that, was making things worse. So I proposed that I loan him the $2. However, I didn't want him, we talked about the drunks, I didn't want him to drink the liquor and be out on the street drunk. So I said, well, what are we going to do about this? How do you, I don't want to help you buy the alcohol that will get you drunk, that will put you in danger.
Right. And as you're telling this story, I'm trying to imagine listeners of the program sitting at home listening to this podcast, and I can imagine someone saying, you're just enabling him.
Right. Absolutely. Right. But that's not what I wanted to do. Well, I was trying, so we're talking out loud. He and I are having a discussion about, I don't want to give you this alcohol. I want you to pay for it to do right by the liquor store. I don't want to give you the money to buy it and have it in your possession, but once you buy it, it's not illegal for you to possess it. So what do you think we should do? And he said, well, I'll pour it out. I said, great. So you'll buy it and then you'll pour it out. That sounds fantastic. This is a business arrangement. I will give you $2, and in exchange for my $2,
you're going to pour it out.
You're going to dump it out. And then I don't have to worry about it. Yeah. So we went over together.
Okay.
He paid for it. We came back. We had a little ceremony. He dumped it out. Problem solved. Except I asked him, why did you steal that? Are you an alcoholic? Do we need to maybe get you in contact with a system that can help you with a substance abuse? And he said, no, I don't drink. Never have. I use it as a trade, as a barter, because it's really hard to steal good food, like to go into the grocery store and get chicken tenders and mashed potatoes.
Oh, okay.
You can't, it's harder to steal that. I could steal that bottle and then
it's
trade it to somebody.
For him, it was more about an alternate form of currency.
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
So I said, well, what were you hoping for? What was your end goal? He said, I haven't eaten in 3 days. There's your victim. He's really the victim. If in my mind, I no longer saw the ABC store as the victim. I saw this young man who's living in the bushes, who's trying to come up with a solution and hasn't eaten in 3 days as the victim. Well,
so he's looking at it as that bottle of alcohol can get him
nourishment,
a hot meal somewhere.
Right. Yep. So we made a date to meet somewhere at a certain time later in the town, and I, again, am blessed to work with officers who are compassionate human beings who will frequently take money out of their own pockets to help with that. So with a couple guys that were on, we both threw $2 in and went and bought a really hearty meal of what he suggested. Chicken tenders, mashed potatoes, corn, a dinner roll, a bottle of water, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it wasn't a Coke and a candy bar.
Right. No McDonald's. That kind of something that a little bit stick to your ribs. Something that he, obviously he had fantasized about it because he mentioned it when he was talking about food.
Wow.
But I work for a police department that doesn't chastise you. What exactly were you doing at 5:50 p.m.? Buying chicken tenders for homeless people? Come on now. That kind of stuff. So they just, I don't know. I've been told by my supervisors that when I stop having compassion, that's when we'll have to talk.
Really?
Yep.
That's fascinating. Okay.
So
that can't be the only time that you've run into unorthodox solutions to situations.
No, I can't think of it. I mean, the stories come to me as we talk, but, I'm no hero. That's the thing. This is not like this is saying that I didn't come into law enforcement because I get some kind of perverse joy out of taking people's freedoms. I don't get excited like, yes, another one going to jail. If it serves a purpose.
That's not why people go into law enforcement?
No,
I thought that was the public perception, that people go into law enforcement because they love busting somebody's rump all the time.
Right, yeah, no. I can comprehend that it is a necessary part of the job sometimes. Sometimes that is how you put the person on the right track. That is the consequence of their actions. That's definitely, it has its place. It's just not always. And I don't get excited about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. So, in the course of your career, everybody likes a good story.
Okay.
I'm sure that over the years, there have been a few events that stick out in your mind for one particular reason or another. Something that was really funny, something that was really personally significant. We all, as we go through life, we always collect stories of things in our mind that have really left an impression on us. The story that you just shared with us sounds like one of those events, that really left an impact on you for some reason. I'm sure there has to be another one.
Okay. Everybody's favorite is a foot chase that I had with a fellow who is large,
Okay.
like well over 6 feet tall and of large stature.
Bigger than you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And younger, so he had some things on his side. And To give you a little foundation here, there's a group of people that were sharing one vehicle. That's pretty common. It's like one vehicle at a house of people making bad decisions. And so they would get in that vehicle and go and steal from the local grocery store. And you'd see the vehicle at the local drug house, and that's how they did. But it was always somebody different.
Okay.
However, it was exceptionally identifiable to me for whatever reason. So my fellow officers during the shift,
like a pink VW Beetle.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
It just called to me. I don't know. If it crossed into our city limits for whatever reason, I could spot it a mile away. And they were always amazed because, girls are not particularly well known for their prowess in vehicle identification and things. But that one, I don't know why. It's, there's some vehicles that just stand out to some different officers. And that was the one.
Okay.
So I had given it a little nickname. It wasn't derogatory or anything. It was based on the first 3 letters in the license plate.
Okay.
And so it started with BK, so I guess it's the 2 letters, or it was BKF, and I called it the Burger King fries truck because I had to have like some kind of association.
Some little mnemonic device.
Right, with the letters. So, and then that's what I called it, but then it turned out all of the officers called it the Burger King fries truck, just, I guess, because it caught on. So,
okay.
Yeah. Okay. So I called my partner, and I happened to know that one of the fellows that frequently rode in that car had an order for his arrest, kind of like he did every other week. And, so I figured...
Repeat business.
Yes, I would catch up with him. And in my mind, we were just going to have a civil encounter like grown-ups in my fantasy world have. And and he would just willingly hop right in the back of my patrol car, and off we'd go. So I saw the Burger King fries truck, ironically, in the Burger King drive-thru. And and I called my partner, and I said, "Oh, Burger King fries truck is in the drive-thru at Burger King. I'm going to get out with them and see if I can talk this fella to come with me."
Right.
And he says, "Okay, I'm on my way." Seeing as how you're little and he's big. And we like to pair up. They're like my big brothers. So he was headed over. Well, too much time was passing, so I attempted to block the Burger King fries truck in. And the fellow jumped out and started to run. Not exactly what I had forecast, but you have to roll with the punches. So
suddenly things have changed.
Yeah, right. So I call a chase on foot, and we're on this busy strip of road.
You call a chase on foot?
Over the radio.
What does that mean? Oh, okay.
Over the radio. I announced to everyone in radio land that I'm in a chase on foot with, this well-known fella.
Okay.
Who, unbeknownst to me, had been in a chase on foot with another deputy the day before and got away. I didn't know that. Fun detail, though. So
fun fact. So now Officer Hops
is after the Goliath.
Officer Hops and repeat business are in a foot chase.
On a busy street at 5 o'clock on a Friday.
Okay.
So it was... So he, obviously leading the parade here, is headed down this steep...
Yeah, it wouldn't be much of a chase if you were in the front.
Right, yeah. Okay. So I'm, in my mind, I'm only communicating to my partner as I blurt out where we're headed over the radio, because I know he's coming. So I want him to know exactly where to find me in case I catch up with large human being there in front of me. And we head down this ravine, and you're thinking all of these things which seem very entertaining as you look back on them. Like, please don't let me fall. There's just hundreds of cars on the on the street. And you kind of end up being Lego. When you fall, you're like Lego police officer, and all your parts come flying off.
And it'll end up on YouTube.
Yeah. Your radio's off in one direction, and the stuff that was in your pockets is now scattered like nither and yon. And yeah, it gets crazy. So I'm thinking like, don't fall. And we kind of run past this automotive business, and the guys out there are yelling. I didn't really catch on to what they were saying because I was kind of focused. They did tell me later that they were asking if they could help me. I wish I would have caught on to that during the chase.
That would have been helpful.
No, I'm going to go it alone. Thank you. Just me and this giant. Yeah. So down we go. Down.
Yeah. In retrospect, knock him down.
Yeah. Just something back out in front of him, anything to kind of slow his roll a little bit. So we go down the steep embankment. We cross the busiest road in my jurisdiction and head, into fast food parking lots and whatnot. Well,
okay. In my mind, I'm picturing a scene from Lethal Weapon, and I'm seeing you and repeat business running across a busy street and cars honking.
Yeah, pretty much, and and I'm hoping that they've paid enough attention to stop for him that they will also remain stopped for me.
Okay.
And that this won't be the one guy that hates law enforcement so much. He's like, sweet, 500 points. Yeah, if I run this chick over. Yeah, so, yeah, it's not looking good. Anyways, so...
So how close are you to this person you're chasing at this point?
Oh, well, not great. I'm probably 2 car lengths behind him.
No, see, to me, that's close. I'm thinking, what are you, 100 yards away or on his heels or...
Now I'm about 2 car lengths behind
him. I'm just looking
him.
for flavor to the story.
Oh, yeah. Here. Well, so you're no Jackie Joyner Kersey or whatever when you've added 30 pounds of gear to your frame. So the belt and the vest and the boots and all of that stuff is an additional 30 pounds.
People don't know who Jackie Joyner Kersey is
I'm sorry.
anymore. Usain Bolt. Everybody
there you go.
knows it. Okay.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So
we got to keep it current.
There's no Usain Bolt type maneuvers in 30 extra pounds of gear. Not for me, anyways, because that's a pretty significant percentage of my body weight. So it's rough. So he's, we're moving. He had to slow down to not get run over, so that closed the gap a little bit, and it starts to really cross my mind that I might catch him, and I'm not completely sure what will happen then.
So how long has this been going on now at this point in time?
Just minutes.
Okay.
Just minutes. And you can hear sirens like raining from the sky.
Okay, so it's not later in the afternoon and you're still trying to chase him
we're not
down.
like miles into it or anything, But it also occurs to me that while you're in training, they talk frequently about giving verbal commands.
Okay.
Don't forget to give verbal commands, and that you will have ear witnesses, that there will be people on scene that will testify to what they heard more than what they saw. Or so if they're around the corner, they will never see anything, but they'll tell an entire story of what they heard.
Okay.
So, I say it's the voice of God that's like, say something,
So you mean at this point you haven't...
I haven't, no.
So it occurs to you several minutes into this whole escapade that you haven't yet given any verbal commands to this person.
Right. I mean, he's clearly aware that I'm a police officer, seeing as how I blocked him in a marked patrol unit, and I'm chasing him in full
He knows he's not running away from
regalia.
his grandmother.
Yes. Okay. Right. So, but I decide to go ahead and try something new and throw out a verbal command.
And you said to him...
I got really super creative. I told him to stop running. So that was it. That's all I could come up with. So that's
simple, direct, to the point.
I didn't want anybody to get confused on what the commands were.
No ambiguity.
Right. Plus, you're a little out of breath. So it's not. You're not going to be blurting out whole sentences or whatnot. It's short and to the point.
I like it. It's direct.
Yep.
It's not. Listen, when you get a chance, if you don't mind for just a moment.
Yep. Okay, I'm getting tired. Could we quit doing this? Yeah, none of that.
Yeah.
So
stop running.
Stop running. That was my words of brilliance. And remarkably, he did completely stop. Pretty much on the spot. Yes.
Really?
Yeah. Totally stopped.
Okay, so now I'm picturing a dog chasing after the car, and suddenly the car stopped.
Right. Well, he stopped, so did I, because I was kind of feeling safer at the 2 car lengths distance, And he turned around and had some choice words for me about interrupting his Burger King meal.
Really?
Yeah, he was really looking forward to whatever it was that he was going to get up there. He, in his own words, he had been using for a couple days, and food had not been on his list of priorities. So
They make a pretty good bacon cheeseburger.
I haven't eaten at Burger King in years. It doesn't agree with me. I don't have anything against Burger King. It's like a really quick trip to the restroom afterwards.
Well, note to producer, there goes our Burger King sponsorship.
Yeah, it agrees with him, though. He liked it. And he was super mad about...
So, a favorite of drug users, not so hot with law enforcement.
Right, or just
there
one.
goes that big Burger King endorsement deal.
You don't think that that's like the catchphrase? Burger King.
I'll have to send that one to BK
meth
Corporate and
addicts.
see
Yeah.
see how they feel about it.
Probably no. Anyways.
So you told him to stop running.
He stopped
running.
Yep.
Had a few thoughts to share with you
Yes.
about interrupting his meal plans.
Yeah, yep. And then my partner arrives, completely coming in sideways, like at 1,000,000 miles
You
an
mean
hour.
like screeching tire sideways?
Yeah. Oh,
or-
yeah. Barely makes the turn. Is in his vehicle, is wide open, sirens blaring, lights are on, and he skids in between the two of us. So thank God I chose to
Yeah,
keep that two-car length, that kind of thing. He skids in between the two of us.
Yeah, that would have made a heck of a blooper reel if he came skidding in and knocked you down.
Right, ran me over, yeah. And he jumps out expecting like that pretty much all chaos would be breaking loose in the parking lot. But instead, here we are at kind
Just
of this
standing there.
standoff. So it's like, all right, well, so I caught him.
So now
There he
what?
is. Well, we put him in handcuffs immediately, and patted him down and that kind of thing. But
Okay, I'm still
he's
stuck with the notion that here you've been chasing this guy on foot for several minutes
Sure.
through town, like a scene out of an action movie.
right.
And then it finally occurs to you to actually tell him to stop running.
Yeah.
And then he stops.
Right.
That's not how the movie goes.
Yes.
See, I've seen all of these
Right.
movies before, and that's never in the script. So why did he stop?
Because he recognized my voice from the jail. That's what he
So
said.
he really was repeat business.
Yeah. Yep. I had not arrested him on the street, but he said that he recognized me from working in the jail. And in his words, I was always fair. So not because he thought I was super nice or because I was going to somehow just annihilate him. He feared for his life. It was an act of courtesy.
So he decided to stop running
Yes.
because he recognized your voice.
And he knew he would be treated fairly.
Really?
Yep.
That's fascinating
Yeah.
to me.
Yep. So
That kind of flies in the face of, lawbreakers wanting to stay away from law enforcement.
right. Well, I mean, eventually someone was going to catch him, but there's only so much running that you can do. I guess he just decided if he elected to go with me, he would not have to gamble with who the next officer would be.
So better to go with somebody who he knows has treated him fairly in the past
right.
than, possibly risk a beat down from somebody else or
Right.
something.
You're right. But, again, that's largely fallacy. I mean, I have not witnessed, and my fellow officers in my jurisdiction don't lay the smackdowns to people. Obviously you have to struggle with some people to get them into handcuffs, but it's not like we're, doing some kind of crazy
So this
pay the toll.
that's fascinating to me
Right.
because that is I've watched a lot of news coverage. That's the first time I've ever heard somebody say that.
Well, it probably doesn't
You
make
don't-
for good news.
Well, I don't know. I think it's making for a pretty interesting podcast.
It's not
but
really as
it doesn't,
exciting.
It doesn't fit into a 10-second soundbite. I'll
Sure.
give you that.
Yeah, no. So, we believe, some of the officers that I'm close to believe that you are policing for the next police officer.
What do you mean?
Have you heard stories from other friends where they're talking about how terrible the so-and-so was that pulled them over for a speeding ticket, and they were so rude, and they said this and said that, and it just sets this taste in their mouth that you fully anticipate that since they've percolated on it for so long, and that's become their legendary story, that the next officer that crosses their path is going to get the chew out.
That bad taste.
Yes. Yeah, they'll get chewed out for whatever it was that the last guy did, because the citizen has been holding on to that and needed some kind of outlet. And that's what they assume.
Okay.
Here comes another one of those guys who's going to treat me bad, and so I'm going to proactively attack, that kind of thing. So the same goes for having pleasant law enforcement experiences. If you can de-escalate, if you can use your words or kindness or whatever it is, empathy, to reach out to people and help them understand that this is kind of part of the job, that you're just a human wearing an exceptionally uncomfortable uniform, then the next officer that encounters them may get some of that carryover too. They might get that benefit of the doubt. They might get the same cooperation and whatnot. So
I think I understand what you're saying.
Right.
That something very similar happened to me not too long ago. I was out on the motorcycle taking a ride through the country, and I ended up being stuck on a 2-lane winding road behind a vehicle that had pulled out in front of me at fairly close range and then proceeded to go about 15 miles an hour under the speed limit, and through all these blind curve areas and things. So I'll admit I was a little bit irritated. And as soon as the road opened up, I had enough room to get around this person, so I did, really ignoring the fact that it was a double yellow zone.
Right.
And just gave her the berries, got around that person, got back into my lane, slowed down, looked in the mirror, nothing but blue lights behind me. And I thought, crap. Where the heck did he come from?
Right.
Well, he had me dead to rights. So I thought, well, I made a bad decision. So I pulled over. Fairly young officer. I'm not going to say what area he was from because I don't want to get him in trouble. But he was very cool about the whole thing. He came up to me. I thought, there's no point in me trying to get away with anything. He got me dead to rights. I passed in an area where I shouldn't have. It doesn't matter the reason. So turned the motorcycle off, took my helmet off before he even got up to me. I asked him, do you mind if I get off the bike and just stand here? He took my license. He did everything he needed to do, and he came back a couple minutes later and handed me back my license and said, and I'm just going to give you a warning. Do me a favor, though. Okay, yeah, officer, what's that? The next time you pass somebody on a double yellow, look in your mirror first and make sure there isn't a cop directly behind you.
Right, yeah.
And I said, I think I can do that. That's a good idea.
That was not a hard favor, sir.
Thanks for the suggestion. I'll be happy to do that for you. But okay, yeah, when you say you're how did you put it? Arresting for the next officer?
You're policing
for the next
for the
officer.
officer that comes behind you.
I can understand what you're driving. I've never heard it put quite that way. That's an interesting way to put it. Now, I assume you've been on the opposite end of that too, where you've had to deal with people who were quite, shall we say, belligerent.
Sure.
Or non-receptive.
Yes.
So you have to fall back on your training for situations like that. Tell me a little bit about the training that goes into being an effective police officer. What are some of the tools that you're given, so to speak? I don't mean the physical tools like handcuffs or things like that.
No.
But what kinds of things what does training look like? for an officer?
There is actual training in verbal de-escalation, and I can't even remember some of the goofy names that they give it, sensitivity training and those kinds of things. But we're not talking about mollycoddling here and petting people, but I think just trying to be open to where they're coming from and what their messages are that might be more nonverbal cues, things like that. So that kind of sensitivity. But really, it's I think that the training that I had would be so cliche, the training of life. The being a seasoned person that helps you learn what works and what doesn't. Or
being a mom.
Yeah, some of that. Doing yoga before you come to work and setting your intentions to be nice to people instead of just coming up and, sometimes the tape in my mind is playing like, what on God's green earth were you thinking? Seriously. So,
Do you ever just say that?
No, I try not to. It kind of sets a tone.
See, that's why I would make a bad police officer, because I don't have that filter. What the heck were you thinking?
Yeah, it sets the tone for an interaction. So if you can...
So you're saying that might put people on the defensive?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So instead... approaching people, I try to just be ready to be open and receptive to what's going on, to listen or to pay attention. This is not tried and true for every single person, because sometimes there's just folks out there that are closed off or that, need, like I say,
just ain't going to hear it.
To have law enforced upon them, unfortunately, and those kinds of things. But many times you find out really interesting things about people that are completely different than what you expected. You like stories. As an example, one of the very first call I had, it was just so busy, like so many days in a row, and I came to work early in the morning, and the first call I got dispatched on was a man disrobing in a local bank parking lot. And in my mind...
Disrobing, that means taking his clothes off.
Right. Yep.
Oh, okay.
In the parking lot, on that same busy street where I just chased old frequent flyer. To go back, by the way, the frequent flyer fella, I became like urban legend. Other officers showed up in here. Here's the little officer that's got the big guy. And
that no one else could catch?
Yeah, right. That had gotten away. And they're like, whoa, how'd you do it? What'd you do? It's like a magician never tells their secrets.
Yeah, because just saying, I told him to stop running, that doesn't make for an exciting story.
No. You don't get street cred amongst other police officers with your, I just gave verbal command.
So how did you get him to stop running? I told him to stop running. Yeah. Oh, that's a terrible story.
Yeah, exactly. Got creative. So naked man in the bank parking lot.
Okay.
I'm driving over, and in my mind, I'm grumbling. Like, seriously, who does this? There's no good reason to just start your day off.
Taking your clothes off in a bank
getting
parking
naked
lot.
in the bank parking lot. I mean, I can't think of one. I'm racking my brain. This is inappropriate. This guy, he's getting an earful from me, by golly. Whew.
At least save it for makeout point.
Yeah, right.
At night.
Yeah. Not on this busy road, broad daylight in a bank. Yeah. So I pulled up, and then the yoga thing, like, be nice. Don't get out and just start off with like some kind of bulldog mentality, So I got out, and it went something more like, hey, hi.
So I see you're taking your clothes off.
No. I said, so tell me a story that starts with you taking your clothes off and ends with, and then the police got called. So, because I'm trying to follow how this is, So it turns out it's pretty interesting, actually. He's down and out. He's a couch surfer, just staying at different people's houses every night and stuff, because he didn't have a place of his own to stay. And he'd stayed with a fella whose cats had fleas. And
Okay.
he had gotten up, put all of his worldly possessions back in his backpack and whatnot, and left for the day, and was started on his walking from place to place. And the fleas got so intense, the flea bites and whatnot got so intense in his clothing that he said, in his words, that he did a total freak out. I said, on who? He said, on myself. I'm freaking out. And the only thing I can think of is to get these flea-infested clothes off of my body.
Okay, so he's not a weirdo.
Yeah. He's like,
just getting attacked by fleas.
right, and literally being driven crazy.
Okay.
And so here he is under the shade of a tree in the bank, nicely manicured bank parking lot, stripping down to his boxers or whatnot and getting what he's hoping is flealess clothes out of his backpack. And he's decided he's going to throw his flea-infested clothes away. So that was not the answer that I expected. Remember, on my way over, I had already decided that there was no good reason to take your clothes off in the middle of the day in the bank parking lot.
I'll admit I was thinking that as well.
Right. But given the chance, he had a pretty good reason. And he was completely
lucid,
polite. Yeah.
rational about the whole thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, as rational as you can be when you're being eaten alive by fleas, I guess. And I've had that mosquitoes.
I don't
lately.
have a frame of reference for being eaten by fleas.
Yeah. I've had dogs with fleas. They do make you crazy. They make the dogs crazy. Mosquitoes here lately where I live will carry you away. And you do crazy things like turn the hose on yourself when you're outside and run around slapping yourself. Things that could be perceived by the neighbors as being somewhat peculiar.
Well, I've run around the yard slapping myself before, but it was for different reasons.
Yeah. So, I just think if you remind yourself that, to give it a chance, sometimes it surprises you.
That's interesting. We have a tagline for the show here. It's Northwest Corner. Everyone has a story. Tell us yours.
Right. Yeah. So
maybe we should be doing some ride-alongs with law enforcement.
Right. This guy has fleas.
might make for great radio.
Yeah.
Theater of the mind.
Right.
Interesting. So, tell me a little bit about where you're heading. And I don't mean where you're driving once you leave here.
Okay.
Where are you heading in your career? You obviously have an upward progression charted for yourself. So, let's put our thinking caps on for a minute, get out the crystal ball, and 10 years from now, what would you like to see yourself doing? Are you wanting to be in a larger community? Are you just wanting to stay where you are, but maybe on a better shift? You seem to be a person who does things with a purpose.
Right. I love my community. I like the people that I've gotten to know and the folks that I work with. And, so I want to stay where I am. I would like to, I've set my goals for and have gotten the support from supervisors that I'd like to be an investigator or a detective, depends on what department you work for as to what name it is. But, I want to be a detective. And I want to specialize in domestic violence and work with women and children victims of crime. Obviously, I'll take anybody, but, that would be what I would consider what's going to be the best asset to the department, because there's already a great set of investigators there.
But doesn't that mean that by the very nature of what you just said, someone who kind of specializes, I guess, for lack of a better word, in domestic violence and abuse and things like that, to me, that sounds like going into the belly of the beast. That the very nature of that job would mean that you would be dealing on a regular basis with some of the darker aspects of humanity. That doesn't sound like something I personally would desire to do. My instincts for self-preservation tend to keep me away from the darker side of humanity. Yet you sound like you want to go into it.
Well, who better to go than somebody that experienced it, that lived it, and knows where some of the flaws are, or the shortcomings. When you sit with someone who has been lumped up, you can put your arm around them if they let you or if they want to. And
lumped up, meaning beaten up? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And when you say, like, I understand, you really understand. And when if you specialize in it and you give people the forecast of what's to come, it's the truth. You know, because you went through it, or you went there, or you helped somebody. I don't know. I guess it fulfills me to feel like I'm helping somebody make a step forward. And back to the stick it mentality. You know, I wasn't really great at getting myself out of it. And now that I am, you know, I can turn back to the naysayers and whatnot and be like, stick it. But you help somebody else make that progression maybe faster than you did. Or maybe with more help. Or any, you know, maybe with just one more cheerleader in their corner or that kind of thing. And then if you bring in the aspect of making the victim whole, that's not always just solely the victim of domestic violence. Sometimes part of the victim cycle is the abuser, who may need counseling for their own series of life events that turn them into the person that they are. I don't think most people are born to beat the ones they love.
I had a pastor who used to say, hurt people hurt people.
Right. Sure. I'd believe it.
Does that get to be overwhelming?
Yes.
For you?
Yep.
So how do you deal with that?
I cry.
That's not a very manly answer.
Sorry. No, my husband says, like, you know, uniformed police officers don't cry. Well, I do. I just hide somewhere so that I'm not, you know, wailing about in public. But no, I have a great support system in my spouse and in the people that I work with, and they are really open to that compassion. And for me, it's actually many times an actual physical response to the stress. Can be tears. Not, you know, I'm not immobilized. And I get all the way through the event and on the other side before I reflect on it and sniffle about it. But there's that. And then
yet you keep going back.
Well, I mean, there's no shortage of people that need help. So
that just seems, I don't want to sound like I'm gushing, but that's amazing to me. Police officers, firefighters, EMTs, you know, the people who run to the danger,
right,
so to speak, when everyone else is running away from the danger. The psychology of that is fascinating to me, because if push came to shove, if I'm honest, I don't know which one of those two groups of people I would be. I would like to think that I would run toward the danger, but if I'm really honest, there's a pretty good chance I would be the one running away from the danger also. So it's fascinating to me, and I don't want to sound like I'm fawning all over you here, but we've established earlier, you're not a physically large person. You're a bit, shall we say, diminutive.
Okay.
You don't come across as a hyper-aggressive person.
No, it doesn't really fit well. It's like how many people get super intimidated when the Chihuahua's ferociously barking at the door.
Well, I don't know. You know, the big, I'm always more worried about the Chihuahuas because, you know, there's a vein right in your ankle. Right. You know, if they get you right in that vein, right, I mean, you'll bleed out in 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, right. Or my sergeant will tell people, don't underestimate her. she'll crawl up you like a tree and rip all your branches off on the way back down. So, and it's like, well, that sounds impressive. So
that is, it really is fascinating to me, the psychology that goes into the people who run toward the danger. Mm-hmm. And I wish that people got to see more of that on the news. That's the aspect of watching the evening news that bothers me, mm-hmm. and the bad press that law enforcement gets. This podcast is not going to be impartial about law enforcement. I'm quite partial mm-hmm. about law enforcement. I think they get a bad rap. I think that there are certainly examples of people in law enforcement who do things that they shouldn't do, but I don't think that's endemic to law enforcement. I think that's endemic to the nature of human beings.
Right.
We all do things that we shouldn't do.
Right. I make a joke or trivialize it by saying, like, I'd never drive through my neighborhood and see somebody with dead grass in their front yard and instantly hate all landscapers. Like, boy, that their landscaper sucks, so I just blanket hate them all.
Well, I don't feel so bad about you looking at our backyard then.
Yeah. So that's very trivializing, but I'm just, like you say, it's just the one
It's
person
too easy to paint with
a
broad strokes
right.
on a canvas.
Right. There's been some math done out there talking about the number of officers that hit the road every day. And, let's say it's 1 million. Mm-hmm. I can't remember all the numbers. I'm not great with numbers. But let's pretend that it's 1 million officers that go out there on patrol every day, and they interact with 2 people, which would be the slowest day there ever was, because I interact with 2 people just trying to get in the door of the office. So, mm-hmm. But you have these exceptionally shy officers, and they only interact with 2 people a day. So
that's still 2 million people.
That's still 2 million interactions. And if one guy has one bad interaction, it makes the news. And we just disregarded the other 1 million.
999 million.
Yeah. Yep. So, bad press. People eat it up. You can't put good news on the front of the newspaper, as I learned, and have them sell. Those were always the lowest selling newspapers. But you put, like, politician's house burns to the ground, and it's like everybody in town buys it.
Well, yeah, but that's because it's a politician.
Yeah, well, not all politicians are bad people. Here we go with the broad brush again.
Well, it has really been enjoyable having you on the show. Thanks so much for coming in.
Thanks for the invitation.
And giving us a little bit of a behind-the-scenes look
at Judy Hopps.
Yeah, Officer Hopps.
The underestimated prey animal.
All right, this has been Northwest Corner. Officer Hopps, thanks so much for being a part.
Thanks for the invitation.
God willing, maybe we'll have you back again another time to tell us some more stories.
That sounds great.
From behind the curtain.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. It's been the Northwest Corner podcast. I'm Sean Kitchen. Stay tuned next week. We got somebody coming up.